Welcome everyone to the IDW Sonic 2020 Annual, a special where multiple individual stories can be told, and utilizing talent not normally seen in the main book. While there are some familiar people in this book, I'll talk a little bit about the newbies when I get to their stories. Unlike last year's annual, this one is centered around a theme. That being, as much as I like this cover, it doesn't really capture what's inside the page. So, there. Yeah, it looks darker, but it's also more appropriate. That's because each of the 6, yes, we're doing 6 this year, tales features that nasty metal agent that transforms animals and plants into robotic zombies that threaten the world. I should note that this was supposed to come out earlier this year, but due to real-world things happening, it was delayed. I've gone into a little more detail about it in my issue 28 review. But needless to say, it was justified this time. Anyway, back to the annual. What you should be aware going into this is there are stories featuring characters and situations that lead into certain points in the main book. As such, spoilers are on high alert for this one. Also, like the previous annual, I will separate each section by story and combining the summary and general thoughts sections into one, which is especially helpful for story number 1. With that, let's get started. Big's big adventure can be summed up as Big the Cat travels the world looking for his pal Froggy, again, all while stumbling across the events of the main series, at least up until issue 24. He finds them, and they head back to their home. Some of you are asking, hold on, I'm up to date on the main comics, and Big has clearly turned into a Zombot from issue 25 onwards. So how did that happen? Don't worry, the story addresses this. You'd think it happened here at Restoration HQ during the events of issue 22. After all, there was evidence of his presence. Well, as I inadvertently gave away earlier, his adventures lasted until the events of issue 24, and until then, he's fine. What happened was, Gemerald stopped him from fully entering the quarantine area. He stayed long enough to poke around, and when there's no evidence of Froggy, he left, just before the chaos happened. Heck, he survived going through Zombot-covered areas unscathed. No, what happened was, as he and Froggy were heading back, they were attacked by Zombots. Big used his fishing line to tie them up, and once again, avoided contact. Froggy, though, hopped on one of them. Big didn't notice that his buddy transformed into a Zombot when they got home, or that he was changing into one by touching him. It wouldn't matter as the liquid metal goo was consuming the entire area. I doubt Froggy did all of that by himself. Or perhaps he did, and it spread between sunset at the beginning and nightfall at the end, and Big did not notice. From what I've heard on the interwebs, Ian got this story idea from Sonic Adventure 2. Namely how Big pops up at random parts of a level while a playable character does their thing. If you're curious about where Big pops up in the levels, I'd recommend watching A+ Start's video on the subject. The same idea applies to this story. While Big has been searching for Froggy all over the world, in the background are some familiar comic events, like Sonic and Shadow fighting over Mr. Tinker, Whisper and her Wisp buddies curiously observing him during the events of issue 8, or him falling off Angel Island into the water just before Knuckles reinserts the Master Emerald. It's actually a good thing Ian did this first story, as he needed to figure out ways to do the Big the Cat cameo while keeping the timeline consistent, for the most part. After falling off Angel Island, he witnessed Dr. Starline freeing Rough and Tumble, Sonic and Silver facing Starline and Metal Sonic, and Sonic and Tails fighting the Skunk Brothers at Windmill Village, in that order. Now this tale is told from Big's point of view, and he could be telling events out of order. It happens. Jonathan Gray does the art, which works for the silly tone this story's going for, right up until the Zombots start popping up, and then it becomes kinda creepy. I also like to credit Reggie Graham for the coloring, especially hiding the reveal that Big and Froggy were infected at the beginning of the story. A nice touch is the panel divides. Starting from where Big spotted Zombot Rough and Tumble down the hole, they started taking on an infected appearance, gradually heading up until the end of the story. A couple final things before we move on. As always, there are shoutouts to the games, whether they're lyrics from a song, or an ending with unfortunate implications. And finally, most puzzling of all, why did Froggy run away this time? There is no partial possession by Chaos, or a kidnapping by Neo Metal Sonic. Was he briefly angry at Big? Was this an extreme game of hide and seek? We may never know. Whatever the case, it is extremely sad that, after all of that, Big and Froggy were only delaying the inevitable. They can remain blissfully ignorant, but in the end, the Zombot crisis comes for everyone. Our second story takes place before the events of issue 19. At a radio station just outside Sunset City, evening DJ Night the Owl, seriously, begins his broadcast. His disgruntled night shift co-worker, Don the Rooster, wow, we're really doing this, Evan, is complaining about his custodial duties. Knight optimistically tells him that he's providing a vital service like he is while on the air. The first call comes in, and the caller says that she's being followed by some scary looking people with shiny metal looking skin. She didn't know who to call since the police won't answer. It doesn't do her any good as the Zombots find her, and the call abruptly ends. Soon more calls are coming in of people being sick, under attack, and panicking until they are also abruptly cut off. Dawn's ready to bail, but Knight wants to stick around to help the people of Sunset City. They are the #1 station after all. Well, Dawn would rather save his own feathers and takes off. That's when Knight gets one last call, from a member of the Restoration. They inform Knight about the Zombots and explain that they've set up a safe house for the survivors, but there's no way to get the word out and they need his help. They provide him with the information, but Knight doesn't know how long he'll last. Luckily for him, Dawn returns with the supplies needed to buy them time. In case you're wondering, he was leaving in his truck. He just happened to tune into the conversation between Knight and the Restoration. And it was Knight mentioning that helping even one person would be worth it to him that changed Dawn's mind. The Rooster starts boarding up the place while Knight starts telling any survivors to head towards the Restoration safe house, the Gold Flicky Hotel, and to call the station if they need help getting there. And the story ends with a Zombot approaching the station. According to her Twitter feed, Evan's goal is to tell a story that felt more grounded than usual, and to introduce some more minor supporting characters. She admits she's riffing on Old Man Al with Knight's design, and Dawn was made as a contrast. If Dawn's fashion sense is reminiscent of Vector's, that too is deliberate. Evan hopes to expand on this in the future, as well as their use as information spreaders to kick off plots. Going back to the grounded nature of the story, I like this. Throughout the majority of the Zombot saga, we've seen things from the various heroes and villains' point of view. And 9 times out of 10, action was involved. Here, we see the thread through the common folk, average Joes going through their lives in a very relatable way, and then, boom, life-changing event. As I'm recording this in the year 2020, I do not need to elaborate how it hits home for many of us during this time. I will say that the story really emphasizes the idea of vital services. Custodians are important for building maintenance and cleaning, and entertainers are important for a number of reasons. Stave off boredom, you really like the person and their content, and so forth. In the end, Dawn and Knight use their skills for a greater good, and based on this last panel, chances are they didn't make it. But their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Survivors did make it to the Gold Flicky Hotel, and they eventually escaped. Before you say, what about issue 22? I have thought of that. Knight said that helping one person would be worth it. Well, what if one of the survivors from the Restoration HQ attack originally came from Sunset City? A couple of observations. First, the station's name. I know call sign letters can be random at times, but I think what Evan was going for with TBR is to be read. And the number 199.2? I believe that's referencing the year 16-bit Sonic 2 came out, and the year the Hedgehog's popularity really took off. Best I got. Also, Crush 40 exists in this continuity. I can imagine them writing their songs based on Sonic and Friends' adventures after said adventures happen in universe. Plus, what type of animals would each member be? All in all, this story shows that in tough times, one doesn't need to have powers to be heroes. You do matter, and sometimes you have the ability to do the right thing underneath a jerkish behavior. This story starts with Metal Sonic walking down the corridors of what I presume is the face ship until he sees a monitor featuring the fight from issue 14. Yes, remind the robot of that humiliation. He moves on until he enters a room containing that old metal Zombot goo, along with a monitor showcasing Sonic's first exposure from issue 15. Upon seeing this, Metal Sonic decides to dip his hand into the goop, hoping something similar happens to him. But the goo falls off his metallic fingers and back into the container. He just stares at his hand until Starline appears and snaps him out of it. He forces Metal Sonic out of his lab, ironically complaining that he's shambling around his lab like a Zombot. This story is open to interpretation, so here's what I think it's about. From what we know of Metal Sonic, he has the mindset that he is the one true Sonic. That's how Eggman made him. Seeing his defeats in battles like issue 14's makes him mad. Oh, if those monitors show his failures as Neo Metal Sonic, he would literally explode. Approaching Starline's lab, seeing the goo and the image of an infected Sonic affected Metal. Neo Metal Sonic related stuff aside, what he wanted was another chance to go toe-to-toe with Sonic on equal terms, to prove once and for all who's the real Sonic. The Zombot incident complicated matters. What was Metal thinking when he dipped his hand into the goop? Did he hope to get infected like Sonic so they can fight each other one last time? Is he worried that if Sonic fully changes, Eggman might have a superior robotic Sonic and he'll be obsolete? Or maybe, despite all of their fights, he has a grudging respect for his loathsome copy, that he might miss their fights with this massive change. Again, this is open to interpretation, and I think that's what Caleb Gollner was going for. Because we're dealing with Metal Sonic in his basic form, that means no dialogue. That's when penciler Aaron Hammerstrom comes in. Confession time, I thought his name was Hammerstorm at first. I mean, it looks close enough, and it would sound awesome, but alas, no. Hammerstrom's previous work on the comics, so this is his first interior work. Along with Reggie Graham's inks and colors, the art manages to capture that downer mood Metal Sonic must be going through. Combine that with Starline berating him at the end, you almost feel kinda sorry for the robot. I will say though, things will get better for him in the end. Trust me. Wow, so far things have ended on a downer note. So how about a change of pace? Starline's admiring Eggman's genius through various portals until he catches the Doctor himself seemingly in trouble. He rushes to help, but all it does was cause the two of them to crash into some boxes. Oh, and the trouble Eggman was having? Finding a light switch. Yep, we've all been there. Since Starline's here, Eggman reveals his egg cave. His home away from home where he spends his days off working on personal projects. Most notably, toy robots. He finds it relaxing to piece them together, and then uses them to plan scenarios. Just admit it, you build toys so you can play with them, Eggman. He has other figurines besides himself and Sonic. There's a robotic Tails, a robotic Espio, and a robotic Starline, which makes the real Starline understandably uneasy. With that, Eggman kicks Starline out of the egg cave and tells him to get back to work, while Eggman himself gets back to his day off. This has the least connection with the Zombot saga, besides Starline observing them in the beginning. I suppose the time frame is important. Based on Starline still being an Eggman fanboy, I'd place this between issues 16 and 18. Right when the Zombots were first unleashed, and before Starline learns about the control issue. The story itself is simple. Starline and the reader learn what Eggman does when he needs a break from world domination. Hey, I get it, you need your space to recharge so you don't get burnt out. I can relate on Eggman's method of relaxation. I used to build Lego sets when I was younger, especially Bionicle back when they were huge, and when I was done, I'd either put them on a shelf or just play with them. I'm probably not alone in this. Still doesn't excuse Eggman from unleashing Zombots on the world. Sarah Grayley, or is it pronounced Grawley, is a comic writer and artist from the UK and has a pretty impressive resume based on what I saw on her website. For her first Sonic comic outing, she does a great job of portraying Eggman as the man-child he occasionally is, as well as having Starline being the Doctor's admirer during this time. I wonder if she watched a certain comedic movie as inspiration for this story. The art by Lamar Wells, Bracardi Curry, and Gigi Gigi does a good job of showcasing the lived-in nature of the egg cave. It's unkempt, there are displays of old badniks like vintage collectibles, and a series of toys proudly displayed on the shelves. I admit, I like the design of the robot toys. I kinda wanna buy some to put on my shelf. So where is the Egg Cave? On the face ship? If that's the case, and spoilers for issue 28, it's likely destroyed along with the face ship. But based on the dialogue, the Egg Cave is probably at some out-of-the-way location so no one can find it on purpose. Starline only found it because he was spying on his idol. Well, that's creepy. Now, considering the plot of an upcoming miniseries has Starline gathering a bunch of villains to take over an Eggman base, I would not be surprised if it's the Egg Cave. Seeing Eggman with those toy robots, I wonder if his day-off hobby of building them helped shape his Mr. Tinker personality. Oh man, I'm getting sad again. Next story, please. This story, set before issue 22, has Vector and SBO on board a restoration airship after another failed search for Charmy. Vector is worried sick while SBO commonly suggests dropping off the refugees and refueling at headquarters for now. Approaching the airship are a flock of flickies, only they're Zombots. And upon closer inspection, flying among them is Zombot Charmy. Vector wastes no time heading out to capture him, using a shield to prevent contact. The Zombot flickies don't make it easy, even protecting Zombot Charmy at one point. SBO throws a smoke bomb to draw the flock away, while also making them confused. But the effect is only temporary. Vector has an idea. He has SBO give him a smoke bomb, then listens closely at the wing flaps. As soon as he hears buzzing, he throws the bomb in the general direction. The Zombots scatter again, and Vector was able to capture Charmy. Heading back inside the ship, Vector and SBO are proud of this victory. Yeah. This marks the debut of comic writer Sam, or Samantha, King. I tried looking up what she's done beforehand, and the results I got include someone who's a singer and songwriter, and an author of psychological suspense novels. So yeah, I believe this Sam hasn't done any professional writing until the 2020 annual. Unless there's an obscure work out there I haven't found. She had the job of answering one of the questions throughout this saga. How did the Chaotix capture Zombot Charmy? And she succeeded. Vector and SBO are in top form here, using their skills to their advantage and trusting each other. I understand Vector's recklessness in getting Charmy back. The events of issue 17 really affected the team, and he wants to make things right. While SBO supports finding Charmy, as always, he takes the approach from a logical perspective. We're introduced to a concept not seen before. At least, that's how I got it. Zombot hierarchy. Throughout the saga, we've seen Zombot animals and Zombot people, but not Zombot animals and people together. Here it seems that Zombot Charmy is in command of the Zombot Flickies. The Flickies themselves acting insect-like, swarming the heroes and protecting their bee leader. Oh my goodness, this just came to me. Is this a small nod to the Archie comics? For those who don't know, in pre-reboot Archie Sonic, Charmy was a prince. I'm not kidding. I don't know about you, but I like this Zombot hierarchy idea and wished it could have been explored more. But the saga is approaching the climax and people are ready to move on. The line art is done by Jamal Peppers, a veteran of the Archie comics. Like Hammerstrom, he's done covers for the IDW series, but as far as I'm aware, this is his first interior work. Welcome back, good sir. While the Chaotix have won a short-term victory, it will ultimately turn into a long-term disaster. Our final story begins with the Sonic Fan Club president, hey, remember him from the previous annual? Going around Spiral Hill Village looking for Tangle. Jewel, knowing who he is thanks to Tangle, lets him know that she is off with Sonic dealing with the Zombot crisis. That's unfortunate because the reason the president's in a panic, the club was having a meeting out in the farms when, according to him, a big ship arrived and started spewing goo. Oh dear. Everyone ran away, and now he cannot find any of his club members. Jewel decides to help the lad find his friends. They head out to the farms, where at first there's no sign of the club members. Then they hear someone calling for help. It's the club vice president. Well, in actuality, there's still a dispute on who's in charge, but for simplicity, I'll call her the VP. She's surrounded by the metal goo, and Jules says not to touch it. Yeah, Tangle told her about it at some point off panel. She flies over to get the VP, and not a moment too soon. The face ship arrives and does its work. She grabs their hands and takes flight, using her wings to give them a speed boost. She must have had Red Bull that day. On their way back to town, we find out what happened to the remaining club members. They make it back, but Jewel discovers metal goo on her hands. Yep, the kids touched it. The VP touched it before the two arrived at the farms, and was covering it up. And the president? Even after Jewel said don't touch it, he just couldn't help himself. It wouldn't matter anyway, because the face ships arrived. And all Jewel can do in her final moments is call Tangle for help. That would be the same call Tangle got in issue 22. It always comes back to issue 22. Later, Tangle arrives at the Mineral Museum, and the story and special end with Zombot Jewel ready to strike. Believe it or not, Jewel's story was foreshadowed in Big's story. While Big was fishing out Froggy, we can see Jewel and the two kids running away from the Zombot club members. Though the timeline's a bit off. The face ship unleashed the goo on the village before the trio's return, while in this story, it happened afterwards. I'll let this slide because it is a nice setup, plus, as I said earlier, the first story's from Big's point of view, and he might have remembered things wrong. This is Gigi's first work as a solo writer. Previously, she worked with Evan Stanley on the Silver Blaze story last year. It was clever of her to reuse the established fan club members from last year's annual. She could have created new characters whole cloth for Jewel to interact with, but instead, utilized established continuity. I approve. On a quick note, I do find it interesting that Tangle told Jewel about her encounter with the fan club, but neglected to mention a few embarrassing details. I don't blame her. We're reminded that Jewel went on adventures with Tangle in their youth. It's that, when it comes to stuff like the Babylon Rogues and the Zombots, she knows that stuff is out of her league. The story marks the penciling debut of Abigail Bulmer, or rather the interior debut. Like Hammerstrom and Peppers, she started with the covers. Her previous works include some illustrations and a series called Claire Justice Ninja. And on this story, we got another home run. I wouldn't mind all of the new talent working on the main book at some point, or any other IDW Sonic projects. All I can say about this story is, like the Chaotix one, it shows events leading up to what happened in the main series. Issue 24 in this case. And that's it for this year's 2020 annual. Yes, it's a bit darker than last year's, but once more, all stories, one way or another, center around the Zombots and the threat they represent. Well, if you're getting tired of this long saga, there is hope. The next main IDW Sonic comic, issue 29, is the climax of the Zombot arc, and it will be coming out later this month, unless new unexpected real-world developments happen. Personally, I hope things get better. Anyway, I'll see you back at the main book for the end of this nightmare.
Did you see anything?
No, sir. I didn't see you playing with your dolls again.
Good!